a clear path to a win, and he took it, no mistakes. And we now have an even match here after 3 games, exactly what we expected.
And it just reminds me of our prediction model, right? Aman, in the Alireza match, I think Alireza was a 94% favorite, a win probability, and Magnus with a 98% win probability, and this one at 56% or something around that. And I think this match is living up to that hype, just how close it is. And I do think this will go down to the wire.
100%. We have what could be the maybe the last game just before the break here, and we have a specialty of Denis Lazavik, right? These kind of Catalan setups. He plays all the time. He's very, very good. Truly one of the best players that's playing the Catalan right now. He treats it more like a system. Like, you can count on him to play it. He knows these lines inside and out.
Absolutely. If anyone wants to learn how to play the Catalan, these are the players that you need to follow. Our chat agreeing that this will come down to the wire. We see the Catalan bishop has been traded off. White does have an extra pawn, but it's about to be picked up to neutralize material. But you have to watch out for ideas like knight c6.
Yep, and maybe to that point, getting the bishop off that e7 square, so knight c6 would no longer be with tempo on the bishop as well. That's why we see an exchange here. The knight on c4 is a really, really nice piece. So if we get to an endgame where white can just support that piece, perhaps with b3 and develop the bishop and just bring the rooks in, I think there is a slight advantage to be played for here.
It's usually the case in Catalan, right? You feel like the position, black has neutralized everything, it's equal material, but there are these little points which do give white a little poison here. That active central knight, that a pawn ready to dislodge black's knight on b6, the control currently of the only open line, that overextended b4 pawn giving away a c4 square. And it's just sort of a slow game, a slow grind, should be holdable, but somehow not as easy as it looks to hold.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I wonder if we're going to see some setup that involves b3. When you play a move like that, you have to be very mindful of the d4 square and also the c3 square that you're opening up. Classic. I'm wondering about bishop d4 here, because if the bishop comes to f6, I think the classic idea in the Catalan is knight on d3, trying to play b3, e4, and maybe just bishop d2. Very modest development, and looking to play an endgame where those pawns, Tanya, can be targets for white's pieces.
And that's the long-term vision, but a huge idea in these positions, right? If all the majors are off the board and you only have the bishops remaining, white has something very solid to play for. The dark squared bishop attacking the pawns, the white king marching on the light squares towards those pawns as well. So black does need to be a little careful, trying to get rid of that dark squared bishop currently. You could do it to get the double pawns as well. He does go for it.
Yeah, I think the idea of trading knight for bishop is really in white's favor, and the idea of double isolated pawns is really in black's favor. So we have a situation where Denis is saying, I'll take the risk. Clearly, these are awful pawns, but the knight against the bishop with dark square pawns over here, I fully understand why he's interested in this endgame.
And he wants to make that bishop extremely passive. Again, majors off the board, that knight jumps to b3 and ties down the black bishop, with the white king having a clear path on the light squares up the board. So Denis with a decision to make. Does he keep the rook? Because that would invite rook c7, a very active piece as well. Not the easiest move, but he does go for a pure minor piece endgame.
I do think that was a miss. I liked your idea of knight b3. So pawn b3 just seems very committal. You can do that move anytime you want. I thought it was in white's favor, potentially to lose the b pawn, but win the a pawn. And I would have rather seen knight b3, and then, like you said, bring the king to the middle.
His idea is to plant the knight now on c4, the other very juicy post, right? He's taken care of that b2 pawn never coming under attack command, and knight b2, knight c4, always a threat here. Denis, he pushes that e pawn, taking control of some squares and also eyeing the move e5.
Yeah, I think if e5 happens, you have the idea of bringing the king up, the knight wants to make it to c4. There's a very easy path to get there. Knight b2, knight c4. But when that happens, the bishop will slide back to c7. And to be honest, at that point, unless you can break through with the king coming to d4 and to c5, it's not clear how you proceed.
And he invites a traffic jam on the E line. Knight takes bishop, pawn takes knight, king e3 would have been a beautiful position to talk about, but none of that. The game does go on. He controls the square b2 for now. So not allowing Denis a clear path to that c4 square.
Yeah, he does a good job for now. A lot of pawns going on dark squares. Basically, white, you can see, is covering every single square. So if white wants a draw, it's there, as far as I can see. There's really no risk for Denis, which is why he's happy to be here. But I don't really know how this knight gets to c4, Tanya, and Arjun has done a good job restricting it.
He was given those few chances to put his bishop on the right spot, to get the king active in the center, making the most of it, and now he just sits on the position. And perhaps Denis will have nothing better to do than to shuffle the king around.
Yep, let's start maybe maneuvering the knight. Like knight e1, I mean, it seems pretty low risk because king c5, I mean, you can always cut that off with king e3 or knight c2. It does feel like the knight has to start maneuvering, and maybe one thing to avoid could be knight d1, because I'm not sure you want to allow bishop d4 there.
And your idea is all around getting that knight, rerouting it to the e3 square so it can finally land on c4. But for Arjun, would it be enough to get his king to d4 and perhaps put the bishop on c7 if he's so allowed to do? I think he's going for your idea, knight e1, king c5 we might see. And then after knight c2, just perhaps fall back with your bishop to c7. Or even bishop to f4, controlling that e3 square.
Yeah, pawn to e3 is quite committal. It does allow the king to reposition, and of course it permanently stops king d4. But I have to say, with the pawn on e3, it feels like we're a lot closer to a draw now, because I'm not seeing the path. I guess we're going to need to go to f3 and try to play knight d2. But of course, the bishop is just going to station itself on c3 there.
Yeah, it's all about trying to find a maneuver where the white knight can land on c4. The bishop blocking b2 for now. And to get to d2, you spend so much time, and black always has the idea of bishop c3 whenever you're threatening knight coming to d2. And now you could shuffle with your king.
Yep, you have to be mindful of, white's king coming all the way up to c4, and maybe if black has the king on c5, there could be, in the right moment, an idea like e5, but I'm just not seeing it just yet. White's probably going to throw in h4 as well. So there are things to think about here, Tanya, but overall, Arjun should have this under control. The question is just whether that 1 minute he has will tick down to, the 10, 15-second mark where it's possible that he makes a mistake because he doesn't have enough time to process everything.
And you have to be really mindful because, like you mentioned, there could be a zugzwang in some positions for black here where he's actually not able to keep that bishop on c3 any longer once the white king does march up to d3. For now, it's
and we're seeing the bishop stay, right?
Arjun.
Because he doesn't want to allow knight d2, and I think he's also conscious of the fact that an e5 move is there, an h4 move is there. There's just a lot of pawn thrusts to consider. Maybe he's thinking about some move that locks everything down, like e5, which is another pawn on a dark square and super, super committal. I don't think that that's the right answer.
This is such a classic example of how to play a knight versus bishop endgame. If you're with the side with the knight here, you put all your pawns on the light squares where it can't be targeted by the bishop. You're trying to jump around with your knight, playing slow, getting it to points where you can start attacking those black pawns. Now knight d2, knight c4 is another threat that black has to be very careful about.
And knight d4 has been an idea for a while, which would force always the king to go back to d6, and white's king would then get the c4 square. I think we're seeing it again here. I wouldn't be surprised to see knight d4 appear. I think he's considering, how much do I want to have this e5 move in? Is it beneficial to include h4? For example, if h4 is met by h6, you probably want to push that pawn to h5.
And just create that 8-6 pawn as a weakness that you always have to watch out for in case the white knight was to infiltrate. For now, he's just shuffling around. Also good strategy when your opponent's got about 2 seconds on the clock.
Okay, and I wonder about the move e5 at all times, because previously I think f5 was possible, but now with knight d6 available as an outpost there, I think knight d6 is a really big deal in that line.
And he missed it. He missed the opportunity. We had the blue arrow, we had the bar shooting up, and Denis had enough time on the clock to figure that out. And now once again, Arjun survives. That knight is headed to f5, attacking 8-6, but black will have bishop f8 to defend the pawn.
Yeah, and at this point, it's really likely that black loses, not because it's losing, but I think this is the type of position you can really go wrong in. We're probably going to see knight f5 to support h4, and if the black king has to move and white gets in, this is a big, big problem. So you can see,
Black
Tanya, there's
pretty
like a
much only has
zugzwang,
the
right?
bishop.
Yeah, there's a zugzwang possible
Exactly,
pretty much at
Aman.
all times.
And for Arjun, he can only make the bishop moves. He can't move his king anywhere. He has to keep the opposition, stopping white from infiltrating with his own king. But for now, move to move, it looks like Arjun's defending bishop f8, support the pawn.
But hang on, he
Whoa.
didn't realize the king was coming to h5. He just didn't process that.
And now his king is not in time to defend that 8-6 pawn. Instead of moving forward, Arjun had to go backwards with his king to be in time to get to that flank.
This is completely over. Every single pawn is going to fall here. The king needed to be on c5 to stop king c4, but as soon as white's king moved away, black's king had to follow. Okay, probably not very smart to allow this, actually. It's a really unnecessary counterplay with a minute on the clock.
And Arjun has the knack of finding ways to make the position chaotic when he's desperate in defense here. h5 does just that, but Denis, ice in his veins, keeps it cool and calm. He's calculated his way through, knows that the knight will come back in time. The king now giving that up, and you're up a pawn in a king-pawn ending. Arjun about to resign here.
Yeah, this is unfortunately white. A little bit too easy of a job there. Yeah, you can head over to the queen side and pick up those pawns.